Hello girls, good afternoon. Welcome to the discussion group that will function as a study group for the class of bilingualism. Okay, so this is going to be the guidelines for this discussion group. Each of the aspects we will be discussing will take a length of 2 minutes, more or less. So let's try to be concise in our answers, but to provide a very well developed discussion. Okay, so the first aspect we will consider is choose 3 dimensions of bilingualism and explain them. Vero, would you like to begin?
Okay, that's okay. Well, 3 dimensions and explain them. Okay, the ability refers to if the speakers or if the bilinguals are their productive and receptive skills. If they are capable of speak and write, or also to listen and read. Then the use refers to the context where you use the language. It may be, for example, the place or also the domain, which is with the kind of people that the bilinguals speak. And the balance of the 2 languages, it is considered if you, well, that even though you are bilingual, there are 2, there is a domain language.
Okay, very good. Lulu, would you please continue with the following 3?
Yes, culture refers to the process of acculturation, which means that we may have bicultural, multicultural, or monocultural bilinguals, in which feelings, attitudes, awareness, and empathy can be developed or influenced. In this process. Then we have development, where maybe we have incipient bilinguals, which are those who develop one language very well and the other language is at the early stages of development. Then we have the ascendant bilingual, who is the person that is expanding the use of the language in different domains. The recessive bilingualism, language is decreasing, which may fall into which may result in language loss. And language attrition is when the person loses their L1 because he or she doesn't use it anymore. And the age is influenced by simultaneous bilingualism, where a person acquires the 2 languages from the very beginning. And sequential bilingualism is when he or she acquired the second language in different stages or ages at the time.
Okay, very good. So I will close with this. When it comes to context, we have 2 different types, as mentioned in the readings. The androgynous, in which 2 languages are spoken within the same context. I always think of Canada, in which English and French are both spoken, well, depending on the area, right? But both of them are well accepted and well developed. And then we have the exogenous, in which an L2 is not considered within the country or within the place, such as in Mexico, in which Spanish is considered, well, although it's not like the official language in the Constitution, it is the language that is spoken mainly. And when it comes to elective bilingualism, is when the speaker has the choice and takes the decision to learn an L2, for example, a student who wants to learn English as a second language. And circumstantial bilingual, this makes me remind me of bilingual process, in which I was taken to the US when I was a kid, and it was not my choice. So I became bilingual through the circumstances that surrounded me, and it just occurred. I was just placed into an English school, and bilingualism took place. Okay, very good. So let's continue. Number 2, Lulu, can you mention factors that may influence language choice, please?
Yes, so we need to consider the context if we are in a monolingual or a bilingual context, because this will definitely influence our language choice. Also, maybe like identity, the age, the status of the language.
Yes, very good. Breda, would you like to complement this?
Yes, I remember also our role as individuals, but also how we see a person. It also influences the physical appearance, or how, or I remember a reading that says that even the name has an influence.
Yes. Well, I would like to sum up with that. The attitudes, like as you mentioned, play a very important role when it comes to choosing a language, either to speak it or to stop speaking it. So it's not just who the speaker is, perhaps, but everything that surrounds that language. Okay, very good.
Yes.
Okay, the following. What is the difference between the fractional and the holistic view of bilingualism? I would like to begin with this discussion. The fractional view considers that there are two separate bilinguals, or two separate monolinguals, sorry, within one person. And the risk of having this view is that you place expectancies on the bilingual to perform as if they were native speakers. For example, if a person learns English as an L2, you expect them to be native like proficient. And it's like having two different separate systems within one person. And what about the holistic view, Berito?
The holistic view is the opposite, and it refers to only one system that incorporates both languages.
Okay, and Lulu, which view do you align more with the fractional or the holistic?
I have to be honest because in my job, like in the PRONI, with the PRONI syllabus is very fractional. So I need to kind of stick with that, although I would like to change it, but definitely it is not on my hands. I need to follow that, but I prefer the holistic view of bilingualism because in this sense, we stop promoting stereotypes about what a bilingual person is.
Yes, very good. So the following is, so in relation to this fractional versus holistic perspective of bilingualism, Benito, would you please explain how Beckman's model relates to this?
Yes, it takes into account different competencies, but if we consider only one language, it's okay because maybe we can be proficient in some of the aspects. But when we are bilingual, it is not necessary that we accomplish all of these objectives, or that we acquire like the highest level of competence in one of these model. In this model, it's more related with, well, that we can complement with both languages.
Yes. Lulu, would you like to add something to Benito's
Yes.
comment?
Yes, for example, I think that sociolinguistic competences, that again, I'm going to take as a reference the curriculum or the PRONI syllabus, sorry, because that mentions, it tries to include the sociolinguistic competences. I think it is important in order to be aware that there are different registers, for example, varieties or dialects of a language. And also it includes the culture of that specific language. So in this sense, this is why I think Beckman's model is important as well.
Yes, and his model aligns with the holistic view, in which language is seen not something as competence-based only, but it has to be with the linguistic resources speaker employs to consider with whom to talk it, where, and why. So it's more than just knowing the code, but knowing where and how to apply it, depending on the circumstances.
Yes.
Okay, very good. So now we're going to turn to the difference between code mixing, code switching, and translanguaging. And I would like to begin this. For example, we need to consider that these definitions vary from author to author. But right now we're going to focus on code switching and mixing, sorry, from the perspective of Holmes, which indicates that code mixing has to do with, or it's focused at the word level. And I can relate a lot to this, mainly because I'm from the north, and we use a lot of code mixing. For example, laquear, troca, carro. And we're not even aware until we go to other places and they speak differently, like camioneta, coche. And it's when you employ or different elements from two languages within one word, contrary to code switching, which focuses on words, sorry, not on words, but on elements that are either within the sentence or across sentences during a conversation. And Lulu, what about translanguaging? Is it the same as code mixing and code switching?
No, I mean, there's sometimes they may be an overlapping, but the main difference is that translanguaging does not deal with codes. It is very focused on identity and emotions, well, speakers' emotions, and also that how and how the speakers change their language according to their situations, their identities and experience. And for example, here Ofelia Garcia is one of the major contributors to defining translanguaging.
Okay, very good. Marito, do you have any comment in this regard?
Yeah, well, I just remember that it was related more with identity and also in educational settings.
Okay, and that has to do with Baker, right?
Yes, that is related to Baker.
Okay, very good. So let's continue. Okay, we have another author, Pavlenko, and what is the relationship between motivation and bilingualism according to this author, Vero?
Well, motivation has been mainly studied in the aspect of individuals, but Pavlenko uses it since the regarding the post-structural view, and she considers that it is not only motivation, we have to see what is behind it. And I can relate with my own process of being bilingual, because when I am well, I learned English after when I was 16 years old, but my mother was the one that pushed me to and I didn't want to speak English. And I think that what happened behind is like some socioeconomical factors that influence in the language, because she didn't tell me be a bilingual and choose a language. It was English.
It was something that to some extent was imposed, right?
Yes.
And Lulu, would you like to complement this?
Yes, I would just only want to make emphasis on how this motivation was categorized. It was thought that motivation was only integrative or instrumental. And integrative, of course, has to do with the sense of belonging to another group. And instrumental, when you want to learn a language just for maybe for economic motivations or cultural purposes, for example.
Yes, very good. In this, when I was going through this, I found really interesting that sometimes what we consider an individual motivation may be triggered by social aspects, because we say, oh yeah, it was my decision or it was my motivation to learn a language, but perhaps it was not yours, but it was just always there, and then you just take it and consider it as yours. Maybe it has to do with language policies, like why English, as Vero mentioned, like why not Chinese, why not German? So yes, motivation is not something that should be considered at the individual level, because it comprises many social features that influence or even originate this, what we call individual motivations. Okay, very good. So now we're gonna move now into the parental language input patterns. Very interesting. Lulu, what can you tell me about the one parent, one language approach?
Okay, so one of the parents speak or chooses to speak one language, probably the community's language, whereas the other stick to the minority language or the other language that he or she is planning to promote, so their kids become bilingual, and it is very strict since they don't mix languages.
Yes, as you mentioned, it's like you have to be very strict on the guidelines to follow. And I would like to mention before continuing that there are three elements that have to be considered. First, the mother and the father and the language they will be considering to speak, and the community. The community plays a very influential role here. So when it comes to inside and outside home, I relate this a lot, again, with my experience as a bilingual. I live in the US, so inside my house, it was just Spanish. But the thing is that there was no clear rule ever. Like my parents never told me, you're only going to speak Spanish here and English outside. No, it was just there. We just followed this invisible rule, and meaning that Spanish will only be spoken inside the house. But when it came to school, any other domain apart from home, we decided to employ only English. Even when my sister and I spoke English, we decided not to implement it inside the house. So that would be this, more or less, the pattern of this inside and outside home. And what about the mixed language, Vero?
Mixed languages are when both languages are spoken at home, but also in the community. And the role of of translanguaging is possible, and it is not seen as something negative.
Okay, very good. And then we have the fourth pattern, that is delay introduction, in which a language is postponed, let's say, to a further future. And I relate a lot this to, for example, minority languages, in which they say, okay, they're going to learn the majority language perhaps at school or later on in their life. So for now, during the first ages or the first years of life, let's focus on the language that the community does not speak. It could be also, of course, with both minority languages and majority languages, although it tends to be more focused on, if they're going to learn a language outside home, let's teach them or let's speak to them into the one they may not have this amount of input. Okay, very good. So related to this, we have the advantages and disadvantages for early and late bilinguals. The three of us are late bilinguals, so perhaps we're more related to the advantages and, of course, the disadvantages of being late bilinguals. What do you think about this, Vero? How did you experience this?
Well, one of the advantages is that I can communicate well, and I am studying, for example, this master's. But a disadvantage may be that it was very difficult for me to achieve spoken competence. It was the latest thing that I could do in my late bilingualism.
And what about an advantage of an early bilingual, Vero? What do you think this
might be that they can use both languages at the beginning, since the beginning, and they can code switch at every time.
Okay, very good. Lulu, what do you think about this?
Well, I think that one of the disadvantages of early bilingualism is that probably the kid, when he or she grows up, maybe he or she starts losing interest in the other language. Whereas, for example, in the late bilingualism, probably you are more conscious about the benefits, let's say, of learning a second language, in this case, English. So definitely motivation will be, although it is not consistent, it maybe can increase during your studies in another language, for example.
Yes, in my case, I consider that late bilinguals have the advantages of developing more metalinguistic awareness. And through this metalinguistic awareness, they can even enhance their own way of learning, because we have a lot more experience, let's say, and we know ourselves more. We know the way we may learn, or that it's more easier. But yes, we can develop more metalinguistic awareness. But as Benito mentions, we may struggle a little bit more when it comes to phonological features, which early bilinguals just acquire, let's say, naturally and effortlessly. And of course, one of the biggest advantages they have, early bilinguals, is time, and therefore input. They have more time to be in contact with the language, but it's not that one is better than the other. but we just have different advantages and disadvantages for each one. Okay, and the last topic we will be discussing is bilingualism research. Throughout this semester, we have been in contact with research that has been conducted in this area. What do you think about it, Lulu? What do you think are the strengths, the weaknesses, and how would you approach bilingual research in case you are interested in conducting it?
Yeah, well, I'm going to start with the weakness because I remember this that I said this in a class, that for me would be very difficult if I conduct research with my kids because I think I would be very biased. I wouldn't be like neutral. So for me, this is the very first weakness. But it is also a strength because if you know your area of study, you should know, or you must be more conscious about how your kid develops talking about language. So maybe that could be an advantage and a disadvantage as well.
Okay, very good. And Benito, what do you think about bilingualism research? What are your thoughts about it?
I'm sorry, Patty, can you repeat the question?
Yes, what do you think about bilingualism research? Would you like to conduct research in this area?
Yes, I would like to conduct research, but also I wouldn't do it with my own kids. We have seen some difficulties and disadvantages, but also I remember the study of Potowski, that it was also a little bit biased because it considered a fractional view of bilingualism, and also the role of the mothers. It is not conclusive, so we have taken into consideration different variables. But yes, I would do research on this.
Before this reading, I was like very interested when it comes like, yes, when I have a baby, I'm gonna conduct research and everything's gonna be fine. But now I have become more aware of all the elements that come into play when it comes to research in bilingualism. And the one that really surprised me was Roca, because I'm a little bit of a control freak. And I was already planning everything and how everything was going to be and who was going to talk. I don't even have babies nor plans, but I already had these plans of how will I raise my kid bilingual. And now I think that I am more aware of all the things that are involved that go beyond what I can do as a mother or as a parent that implements a language home policies. And also the extent to which we can infer or interfere, in the process of bilinguals, because we're just perhaps leaving aside this naturality of bilingualism process the kid may have. So it's like, yes, you should be in, but to what extent? And as Lulu mentions, we are very biased. It's going to be our kid. So we have like these two sides. Yes, we have to be involved, but to what extent? Okay, girls, thank you very much for this study group. I hope it was useful, and I hope we continue interested in this amazing topic of bilingualism. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.